Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. So far, we've read some amazing channelings from Quo, who is a group of higher density beings that are channeled through LL Research. You can find out a lot more information about them at llresearch.org. We've covered a variety of topics. The interesting thing about LL Research is that they've been channeling for 50 years. Check out my other episodes to get a better history of LL Research. They're essentially channeling a group that is in service of the Confederation of Planets. Earlier in their experience, they channeled different entities, one called Oxal and one very fascinating entity called Yom. I'm including this with the Quo channelings because they are also from the Confederation. They channeled with Latwii and Hatonn, but there's this very unique entity that was channeled several different times called Yom. And Yom appears to be a more science-oriented channel, and some of the information that they discussed was incredibly fascinating and quite different. We've explored Aaron and some other entities that had been channeled with Quo, and we have not yet explored the Yom channeling, so I wanted to explore these with you. The first Yom channeling comes from January 6th, 1974. So this is prior to them doing the Law of One channelings or the raw material that they became so popular for. I am Yom. I greet you in the love and light of our infinite Creator. It is a privilege to be with you. I am aware of certain things that you wish to know. I am Yom. I will tell you what I know of these things. We are here now, where we are, and we are going to be someplace at a later time. But both places are one place. Each is possible. Each is true. It depends on your awareness. I would suggest that you would observe a bubble at the bottom of a glass of water. It is originally smaller than when it rises to the top. If you take this bubble to an extreme depth, it will flatten to a form that is lenticular. This is because of the extreme differential of pressure. The gradient at that depth is sufficient to cause this information. This same gradient exists in space. It is responsible for the galactic shape. This pressure is external pressure to the galactic system, causing a lenticular shape. Within the system, there are planetary systems. These systems are within a flattened orbit. This is because they naturally, due to this pressure, find themselves in one place of rotation. All galactic systems are lenticular in shape, except for those that are extremely close to other systems. The creation has the property of creating this shape. If there is sufficient freedom of materials in the galactic system, this freedom exists. In the bubble at the extreme depth, this situation exists. Now let us consider the cause for the pressure creating the shape. If the gravitational theories that your scientists support were correct, galaxies would be spherical. Sufficient freedom being allowed, they would coalesce into a simple ball. There is a scheme to the creation that provides for separation of systems. There is no inertial expansion of the creation, as many of your scientists believe. There are forces holding all bodies in their position, and forces causing the rotation of those bodies. These forces are external to the bodies. They are not generated within the bodies. They are a property of the great creation in general, and not an interactive force between bodies. Observe the placement of galactic systems with respect to other systems. They are separated by several major diameters or less. At this relative close proximity, if the gravitational theories were correct, there would be an influence of one system upon the other, creating in a relatively short period a combining of the two systems. It is therefore suggested that your present theories of gravitation are incorrect. Each system of stars exists in a field that has a gradient in the direction of the minor axis. The entire thing becomes a large wheel. Within this wheel we find many small wheels. These are the planetary systems. They also experience this gradient and therefore are flat or within the same plane. Although your science is unable to discern the numerous planetary systems within the galaxy, If it could, it would find them all to be oriented so that the planes of their rotations are parallel. And this plane of their rotation is parallel to the major plane of the galactic system, which includes its major diameters. Each planetary system rotates around its central axis. This axis is parallel to the central axis of the galactic system. The entire system rotates around its central axis. All of this was planned. All of it has meaning. All of it has purpose. You are on a system which is relatively close to the outer edge of the galactic system. The angular velocity results in a relatively high linear velocity of your system with respect to the central axis. This linear velocity of your planetary system thereby passes you through much more space than those who dwell near the center of the galactic system. You are moving now from one zone into another due to the rotation of the galaxy. The space traversed by your planet and its system is close to the maximum per unit time that can be appreciated within a system of planets within this galaxy. There is a reason for this. The reason is that your system is an early stage of evolution, and therefore there must be a long, angular path, resulting in, I should say, a long arc of experience for your system. If you were dwelling much closer to the center of the galaxy, or at the center of rotation, there would be no progression through space with respect to the central axis of the galaxy. As you experience night and day and seasons of the year due to rotation, you also experience seasons of spirituality due to rotation. These exist within the rotation of the galactic system. I will return to this instrument another time, for he is becoming fatigued. It is difficult to use control for a long period of time. It is difficult to translate all that I have to say to an understandable framework for you because of limitations of concepts. But we will continue, and we will attempt to bridge this gap. I am Yom. I leave you in his love and in his light. Having heard many channelings from the Confederation and Quo, I found this quite different, particularly the discussion of scientific principles which have always interested me. In researching Yom, after this particular channeling, it is 11 years before Yom channels again. On June 9th, 1985, I am Yom. I greet you in the love and light of the infinite Creator, whose number is 1. We are called to you by the one known as A. And because there are so few queries which make sense to a group which is not made completely of your scientist, which we may answer, we shall be brief. However, the entity known as A wished to experience our presence. Therefore, we shall speak briefly and then dwell with the one known as A, as it is possible our vibration may be comforting. We would speak briefly of electricity and gravity. The energies involved are spiritual and spiritually integrated with the ratio of space and time. Because this is not understood by your peoples, electricity is not understood by your peoples. It is merely used by your peoples. Because the spiritual nature of gravity is not understood by your peoples, the universe loses the unique cosmology which it deserves. That is, the cosmology of spirit and consciousness. We use a very poor instrument to transfer thoughts of this nature, for this instrument does not have a vocabulary or even concept for what we speak. However, we give you these few thoughts to provoke further thought within yourself as to the spiritual nature of the physical as well as the metaphysical universe. You have pondered light. We assume what light is, how light works, and so forth. You have not come up with any answers yet. We also assume. Remember, we greet you in light. Ask yourself what the attractive power of that which is sent away shall be if all things are indeed one. Ask yourself if children grow up and return to complete a cycle of growth. We leave this instrument rejoicing, as do all, in the confederations of planets in the service of the infinite Creator, in the love and in the light of that one source of all that there is. We are known to this instrument and now to this group as Yom. It has been enjoyable to speak with an engineer once again. We bless you all, even those who are not scientists, and leave you, Adonai, my friends. Those were the initial channelings from Yom. there are actually quite a few additional channelings from Yom that can be found. There were several I looked at, but this one in particular I was most interested in to share with you. Delivered on April 16th, 1989. The question this evening, Jay, has to do with the basic sounds, shapes, colors, and mathematical equations that are found in nature. Is there a fundamental mathematical equation or relationship between any, or among all, of the basic shapes, the manifestations that we see in everyday life within the primal nature environment? Is there a correlation between manifestation? Does it have shape and sound and color and a mathematical equation that will tell us what it is if we only know one of those factors about it? I am Yom. I greet you in the love and light of the infinite creator. We are most pleased to be called to this group. We have never used this instrument. There is a good reason for not using this instrument. This instrument is very ill-equipped to speak in scientific language. We shall, however, do the best we can with this instrument, as your subject is one which, shall we say, we cover when it comes to the type of call that comes to confederation entities. We tend, shall we say, to specialize so that each of us may learn a somewhat different lesson in service, given that we have a certain gift in our culture for one thing or another. For us, it happened to be that science led us to what you would call religion, rather than religion leading us to science. Therefore, we are those of faith who learned through science rather than those of faith to whom science may seem to be an adversary. Thus, this is our subject, and we are most grateful to have this call from you. We do apologize for this instrument's paucity of acceptable technical vocabulary, for there is much within your scientific jargon which we could use if this instrument were aware of the words. This instrument does not wish to go into trance. Therefore, we shall have to give you the layman's version of our studied answer to your query, which was, although awkwardly phrased, an important query, we thought, and one which deserves perhaps to be restated in terms of its central question. That is there an order to nature, and does it somehow coincide with a metaphysical order? We feel that this was the question that was attempting to be asked, and it is a large subject. First of all, let us address the subject of order. In the sense which most of your measuring devices could discover, there's only observed order and not true order. In terms of metaphysical order, the universe gives certain hints of the nature of this order. It does not occur to entities how fragile these physical vehicles are and how probable it would be, were there not absolute order, for there to be enough significant variation in the habitat of creatures such as yourselves, that life would not be possible. One may gaze at the starry sky and notice that the light is neither imploding nor exploding. The stars remain fixed, although we may note there is always the oxymoron in spirituality. You gaze at the past as you gaze at the order of the universal sky. There would have to be infinite order, for the Creator is without order. Anything that is created first because the Creator had a thought of love. It decided to create beings of itself so they could exist in illusions, react as free conscious entities, and send back to that self, that is the Creator, within that information about the self to the great self. Thus, the Creator created a principle, a thought. It was love. Love chose out of all the ways to create the particle called the photon. Light is your constant in a metaphysical way that is not at this time measurable by your scientists. The radiance of the sun, which may physically be measured, is notable in that it moves in a constant rate of speed. This velocity organizes and is the tune of love. It both is and moves. It is that which creates space and time. As all is a unity, all things within the creation that is local are, indeed, fractions of that which you may call unit, velocity, or the speed of light. For the photon creates all that there is, and creates it, not as your scientists believe by the creation of mass, but by the creation of vibratory energy patterns in a severely hierarchical and mathematical order. The link between many unrelated, observed, simultaneous periodic happenings is a link that is tangential to that basic common denominator, which you call the speed of light. It being the vibration of intelligent energy, and that which your universe must be built from. There are hierarchies of order, much as in your classification of plants and animals. There are the phyla, the genera, the species. So in order which the Creator has wrought, there are hierarchies of energies. Thus, within the world which you call your natural world, there is a good deal of order. Now, some of this order must seem somewhat random because it has to do with time rather than space. We have trouble expressing our thoughts through this instrument, but we'll forge ahead as best we can to try to explicate this hierarchy. It is as though there were one universe which contained one great principle, that principle being love, in all forms from animal to mineral to the vegetable kingdom, to spirits of air and water, wind and fire, to gods and goddesses and planets, to all the mythical thoughts of all the cultures. There is indeed an order. Yet some of this order is, shall we say, the y-axis, and your scientists move along the x-axis. The intersection at the very middle is the constant. The universe is one and expresses itself as love. Now it is understandable that gazing closer and closer at an object, with the tools at your disposal, your scientists would gradually find that nothing can be measured. You are a part of an intelligent infinity. You are all one thing. Finitude is apparent, but it is an illusion. Press that illusion and it shall fail. The average, as this instrument would say, man on the street does not know how to press the illusion except by the use of mind-altering substances. The thinker, the religionist, and the scientist have far more resources, and they shall discover chaos and order once they discover the hierarchical nature of consciousness. For all is perfect in its consciousness, and life and all is the Creator. Yet there are various manifestations of consciousness, from the least conscious rock to the self-awareness that each of you who seek now show as you choose to seek the truth. Can you measure yourself? Do you have order? Yes, my friends, you are creatures of geometrical order. Your mind can be understood, its resources may be used. But may we say to you that along the y-axis of time, there is that which is called patience. All the emotions are those created by time. Emotions are to be given their due in understanding, as best you can, that which is the natural order of the self-conscious entity. Therefore, each of you must think and feel, and you will find that your scientists will make their breakthroughs not only as those who use those numbers, which have proven effective in creating useful things in the past. They will also be using themselves as instruments, their intuition, their deep knowledge, the discipline of their personality. To this approach will the illusion offer the most clarity of observation. We know not how to offer you a mechanical way to gaze with this wisdom at the world of nature. We cannot, because of the restrictions of infringement upon free will, discuss the qualities of such things as the use of the voice in speaking or singing, or instruments in making tunes or colors or shapes. We can say specifically that one may think of some of the shapes which one may see among your peoples as you might think of the brands of your cattle. The instrument is challenging me again. Pardon me, we must pause. Carla channeling. I am Yom. I am again with you. This instrument is very keen on the challenging, we must say. She hurls herself at us, and we would be most fearsome and want to leave. Indeed, if we did not come able to say Christ is Lord, this child has Christ as Lord, thus we may say that. We may therefore stay, but my goodness, this little entity is very fierce. Now, we were speaking of the metaphysical order of the human personality. It is to be, because of the needs of time, a slow and gentle penetration of the subconscious by the conscious mind. It is a very, very good idea to remember that that which is the most real thing within this illusion, that is the human spirit, has both the x-axis of space and the y-axis of time. It is therefore an entity of love, and it must be approached lovingly. The subconscious must be wooed, not only gently, carefully, discriminatingly, but also with gentleness, with returned passion, with respect, with praise, and with honor. It may seem unnecessary in meditation to approach the silence as one would approach a lover, yet we ask you to sit and listen, as you would listen to the one you adore, waiting with bated breath for that moment when you are aware that you and the Creator are lost in light together. This experience is the teacher that is the basis of all those inquiries that each field of study shall make that shall offer a more appropriate model of the illusion. For once one understands the reality, one may see, of course, the illusions are carefully, systematically, and hierarchically engineered. We may suggest one application that a member that is present in this group would find especially interesting, and that is that there are connections between sounds, shall we say, and color. However, perhaps the most satisfactory blending of X and Y axis is the use of human voice in the chanting and praying simultaneously. For there is the notation black and white upon the page of music, the words to speak clarity in the Y-axis of emotion, the breath of finitude, the time factor. You see time as a river. See time rather as a woman and woo her. Enjoy her and honor her, for that is one of those measurements which is beyond knowledge. Lost in infinity, the parentheses of birth and death in an incarnation is not measurable. There we have a random effect, yet it is not random, as many things are not random. They are choices made at some hierarchical level of creation by a creator, which above all things in the vast illusion of the infinity that we call space and time. We must pause. We are Yom. We are Yom. We are again with this instrument, but we find that we have a fatigued instrument and we lose this instrument. Therefore, we would attempt to transfer to the one known as Jim, if this instrument would accept the contact. We will now leave this instrument in love and light. We are known to you as Yom. I am Yom, and greet each once again through this instrument. This is a new instrument for us, and we are grateful to be able to speak our thoughts through it. However, it may take some coordination, shall we say, upon our part and upon the part of the instrument as well, before we have a satisfactory contact. We are happy to work with this instrument and shall do so as we complete that thought which we have begun through the one known as Carla. My friends, as you are tapped within the infinity of all that is by your experience, within your illusion, you find yourselves pondering the relationships between yourself and that which is about you. And we have spoken this evening about those relationships having as their unifying factor that quality of the Creator which is called amongst your peoples the Hatonn, light. My friends, you travel and are at your very heart moving within this light, which has love as its product, love that is formed in such and such a way according to the vibrations of light that has formed all that is. You find yourselves attempting to penetrate the mysteries of your existence, which means that you attempt to penetrate the nature of love and the nature of light and the nature of free will, which has created both of these qualities, the nature of the one infinite Creator, the Creator which has chosen to set in motion the creation as you know it, and the creation that lies beyond that which you know, which rests in mystery. As you explore on the equations of your relationships, on the qualities of your experience, you will find that the components of these equations can be reduced to your ability to accept more of yourself, of the creation, and of your experience as being whole and perfect within itself, lacking nothing. There is within each human heart the ability to express this acceptance in a direct ratio with the sincere desire to know what you call truth. For as you sincerely seek the truth of your experience and of yourself, you will find that all has the foundation of love and the qualities of light as it vibrates in a specifically defined field that gives you a framework or an environment in which to exercise your love. Thus, the creation has been made that you might play, as it were, study, romp, as does the kitten in the fields of experience that are made possible by the vibrational frequencies of the light which enfolds you and the love which empowers you. At this time, we feel that we have spoken upon this point in relationship to the ability of these instruments to express, in general terms, an introductory exploration into the unifying factors of shape, of sound, of color, and of the conceptualizations that depend therefrom. Therefore, we shall at this time ask if we may speak to any further queries which those present may have for us, realizing, of course, that we have a difficulty with the vocabulary of these instruments. I have a question. You mentioned that sound has a relationship with color. Does sound or vibration also have a manifestation as form or shape? I am Yom. The phenomenon of sound, that is, the vibration that is perceived by the ear, has not only the color that is caused to spring to the clear mind, but may have a shape according to the, shall we say, receptive abilities of the one who hears the vibration. This is to say that there is an interrelationship and an interaction between the vibration which is heard and the mind of the one who hears the vibration. The color correlation is more clearly, shall we say, of an objective nature and may be formed according to the desires of the entity experiencing the sound vibration. There is, however, also the possibility that if the source of the sound vibration desires, there may be a transmission of concept or form in what you may loosely call the holographic picture that may be perceived then by the receiver. There is in that case then a more definite image which is possible to construct according to the construction of the sound vibrations. These vibrations being multiple in nature in order to construct the image. Is there another query, my brother? Yes. Question: when a thought is created, does this thought become a vibration, or is it already a vibration that again is manifested as a form? I am Yom. You may see each thought that is created by the thinker as being similar to the message written upon the sand next to your body of water. The action of the waves will erase the drawing if it is not repeated often enough. The thought, which has but small duration, then, does not retain its integrity over a long span of time without the rethinking or recreation of the thought. Is there another query, my brother? Question: yes. Within the electromagnetic spectrum, we are limited in our instruments to visual phenomenon, auditory phenomenon, and tactile phenomenon. Are we also limited to shapes within these phenomenon and creation of forms? Are there some basic shapes that are locked into this field that we exist in? Are there 5 or 6 basic shapes reoccurring in nature? I am Yom. And within your third density environment, we find that this is indeed true, for the experience that you now enjoy has certain parameters that preclude further construction of shapes that would exist beyond those which you now know as the fundamental geometric shapes. We find that it is difficult to describe with the words of your illusion that which may lie beyond the illusion in terms of the shapes, those that would partake also in time. Therefore, we must apologize for our inability to describe beyond the limits of the words and the limit of this instrument's vocabulary. Is there another query, my brother? Question: yes. Are the basic shapes squares, triangles, lines, pyramids? I am Yom, and am again with this instrument. As we perceive the query, we might suggest that the basic shapes which you have described are those which are indeed fundamental to your illusion, and we would suggest that the limitation that exists is one which is related, as we spoke previously, to the parameters of your illusion which make it possible. Question: do circular shapes and spirals have more to do with the y-axis than the x, more to do with time than space? I am Yom. These shapes have a great deal, indeed, to do with that which you call time, for their construction suggests that which is eternal, that which has no beginning and no end, and their utilization as a form of metaphysical geometry, if we may use these terms, is to suggest the deeper mind, the concept of eternity and the mystery which surrounds it, in order for that seeker might utilize these shapes as a type of visualized mantra that will awaken certain portions of the unconscious mind that has contained within it the more fundamental perceptions regarding the self in its relationship to the current illusion and the movement beyond the current incarnation, in order that the seeker might begin to relate itself to those qualities that it currently sees as beyond the self, but which in truth are contained in a larger perception of the self. Is there another query? Question: so even the DNA double helix points directly to the mystery of the Creator in infinity, is that right? I am Yom, and this is quite acceptable, my sister. Question: if is the point of the x and the y-axis our present incarnation, and if so, then we exist also in the beyond the present incarnation. At the same time, we create and generate forms and realities coexistent with the present incarnation. Is this true? I am Yom. We find that your observation has a basic correctness to it, though we are unsure as to our ability to add significantly the ramifications which we feel are significant. The intersection of the, as you call it, x and y axis is a point within incarnation, as well as being perhaps seen as the incarnation itself. In this description, then, you may see the point as not just the point, but as describing a progression, or that which began to appear as a moving line as the incarnation itself progressed. However, this again lacks refinement, for the line does not move in a singular path, but has variation according to both the x and the y axis, as well as varying according to certain, shall we call them, internal rhythms or predilections of each individual seeker. Therefore, there is oftentimes a contact with, or an awakening of, latent portions of the personality of the greater self, which would add a certain influence that would also need to be registered upon the point that has become now a line, which now begins to move in other directions, so that there is described that which begins to take a shape or a form, so that the point then becomes the line, then becomes three-dimensional, then begins to take the form of a picture, so that you might see the incarnation as completing a kind of sculpture, so that after a certain point, the analogy of the x and y axis becomes too simplistic in order to describe the entire range of this process. That is, the self moving through an incarnation that moves through a creation that is itself moving within itself and beyond. Question I'd like to ask in a different way. We exist in the third density, but also exist in the fourth, in the fifth, and the sixth simultaneously, and probably more. And we are able to leave the present density and see different times and spaces and personalities of ourselves. Is that right? I am Yom. Again, we do not wish to mislead by oversimplification, for there is a great deal of what you call complexity and extrapolations and ramifications to this simple statement. For many, this is indeed true that there are parallel existences that may in certain circumstances be tapped into, as you may call it, so that information might be received in one fashion or another, whether through dreaming, through the creative process, through the intuition, or through information that simply appears within the mind complex. There is, through this communication to the self from other portions of the self, the attempt to widen the point of view, so that there is the possibility of enhancing the current incarnational experience in a manner which fulfills the goals for the incarnation that were set prior to its inception. However, there are some entities that have as their primary experience this incarnation and this incarnation alone, for their objectives have a far simpler construction and are in need of the more, shall we call them, nuts and bolts type of experiences that will allow for the beginning of the construction of the larger conception of the self that shall at a later incarnation be added upon. Question: is it possible to make a wrong decision? I have to make some very important decisions with people that I associate myself with in the next few days, and there are many possibilities. There are many ways to go and no clear-cut answers as to which way to decide. And is it possible that we can decide upon a destiny line, or is it already preordained that we have to go through certain experiences? And if so, can we make our own decisions? I guess I just need to be more at ease about that. I am Yom. This is a question that has merit, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak to it. Within your illusion, and indeed within any illusion in which conscious entities exist, there is only experience which may be had. It is not possible to make what you would call within your illusion a mistake, for the experience which has been set out for you by you with the aid of others, under whose care you exist, has been programmed into your subconscious mind in a fashion which will allow you to perceive within others and within various situations that which you need to perceive in the way that you need to perceive it, in order that the opportunity be presented to you to pursue those lessons and those services which you have felt appropriate within this life experience. Thus, two entities may look upon the same situation and draw from it separate conclusions, according to those lenses which have been placed previous to the incarnation and have been refined through free will during the incarnation. As you make choices, you will discover that you perceive that which is within your ability, therefore, to perceive. It is necessary that you allow for the greatest expertise in perceiving to determine that which you feel is of importance to you, that which you desire, and that which you ask or expect from a situation. When you have decided this through contemplation, through prayer, and through meditation, and have done so with sincerity, you will discover that there is a certain ordering of priorities that becomes more apparent to your conscious mind as you pursue this ordering of priorities. You will provide yourself with those opportunities that you have determined to be appropriate previous to the incarnation, and you will have provided yourself with these opportunities in the most efficacious manner that is possible. Though there are indeed no mistakes within your experience or within any experience, there is the possibility of greater or lesser ease in presenting the self within the opportunity to learn. Therefore, we suggest that you take the necessary time to ask yourself what it is you desire, so that those choices that await you might begin to make more clearly ordered according to their appropriateness at this particular time within your experience. Question? Earlier you said, if I understood correctly, that basically we do not create with a single thought only one at a time. If I understood that correctly, could you elaborate just a little bit on the process of reinforcement of creation by thought, when that thought is reinforced through repetition? I am Yom, and we shall use the analogy of the artist. The first thought that one may begin to create with is as the beginning idea with which the artist begins. If the idea has no merit, the artist has no time to pursue it. The idea perhaps will fade. If the artist feels, however, that there is merit, perhaps the first outline of a sketch will present itself in the mind. Perhaps this shall be carried further and shall be put upon the paper with the outline. If there is further inspiration for the beginning work of art or thought, perhaps there shall be the elaboration, the adding of color, the refining, perhaps after the preliminary drawings have been made. There shall be the sculpting in clay, perhaps the final product shall be bronzed. As an entity begins to think a thought and finds that the thought holds the interest, that it has merit, the entity will begin to think further upon the thought within the mind, adding the ramifications, deciding that there is a small thing that might be done now to aid the vitalization of this thought. Perhaps continued thinking will produce continued action. Perhaps the entity shall then find that the thought begins to take upon itself a certain life of its own, and there is a communication developed between the entity and the thought, with the thought seeming to offer suggestions as to how it might become a thing within the experience of the thinker. It is necessary in this process that there be some action of a concrete nature taken at some point within the thinking process. For though it is true that the mind is a powerful tool that has the ability to create, it also is true that as with any form of what you might call the ritualized white magic, there must be grounding within the physical material illusion of that which is within the metaphysical realms at its inception. Therefore, as you continue the dialogue between yourself and the thought, you will find a natural process of creation being played out through this dialogue. Then you will begin to discover that this is not an exotic process reserved for but a few, but a process which is constantly being utilized by each entity at all times. There is, however, the possibility of utilizing this process within any sphere of one's experience, and not just with the more mundane levels of daily round of activities. As one easily visualizes the running of errands, the attending of the class, the doing of the work, these become as easy as the breathing, the walking, and the looking. The ability to utilize this process in a manner which is new to the seeker is what is generally called the creative ability, and is one which needs only the refinement in order to be utilized within the life experience. Is there a further query, my brother? I have a final question I'd like to ask. When the time and space axis creates a physical entity that we are in this creation, what happens when another consciousness enters in that with us, such as intervention by star people or so-called possessions? Do we have a dual consciousness, and does one subjugate the other? How does that work? I am Yom. Whether an entity has a shared experience with those of the, shall we say, call it extraterrestrial nature, or an experience with a terrestrial entity of the same family and neighborhood or geographical location, the consciousness that experiences the blending of energies for however long it might last is a consciousness that remains intact, and that which has the ability or the power to continue exercising its own free will, unless it shall, for any reason, conscious or unconscious, choose to give that power to another, as those who study your psychology and sociology will attest. There is the relationship of human beings, the continual trading of the power over the self between various entities for a great variety of reasons, each of which has a relationship to the central theme of the incarnation, the ability to give and receive love under a great variety of conditions. Therefore, the relationship that has as its foundations the complete power to exercise free will vested within each entity having a variety of lessons and services that it desires to perform, and therefore, when it joins with any other entities, there is the interrelationship and interaction that affects both entities in a manner which is described by the pre-incarnative choices that in themselves form the lens of which we spoke previously, that which is the subconscious predilection to see certain events in certain ways. Very good, thank you. I am Yom, and we thank you, my sister. We apologize for the necessity to bring this particular session to a close, but we find that the instrument has had a somewhat wearying day, and this makes concentration necessary for clear contact somewhat difficult. Therefore, we shall express our great gratitude at being able to join this group and utilize these instruments this evening. It has been a great span of your time since we have had the honor of joining your group as other than observer. We thank each for extending this invitation and look forward to any future opportunity in which our service might be appreciated. We are those of Yom, and leave each in the love and light of the one infinite creator, Hatonn, my friends. And this concludes this particular channeling. As you can tell, Yom is a little different than Quo. Very little discussion here about service. Lots of different scientific discussions. Not all that important, but we do get a feeling for the importance of sacred geometries on consciousness. It's established fairly well here that all of creation comes from the photon, and a lot of what they're teaching is very similar to the secret of light. The discussion at the beginning about gravity and the movement of the planets and the solar system through the galaxy is just fascinating to me. That the placement of our solar system is related to our own evolution, and we start moving closer and closer to the center of the galaxy over a long period of time as we evolve. Some interesting observations made about thought as it relates to the vibration and its impact on our environment. I would love to know what you think, and there's certainly some more Yom Channelings that we can read. But as a completist, I wanted to at least touch upon some of these channelings so you can get a taste of it in relation to Quo. Quo is a part of the Confederation, and it's not necessarily a Quo channeling, but I'm putting this under the umbrella of Quo to help us understand the history of these channelings and to have a different perspective. I'd love to know what you think. In any case, you can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.